Oh, really? Conventional?
Yeah.
What about non-conventional one?
Non-conventional, it depends how much honey there is. If there's loads of honey, then a non-conventional beekeeper might do it once a year.
Oh. So why does conventional...
Why do they go into the hives? It's every 10 days. They go in to check that there are no swarms forming. So if they see a queen cell, which is making a new queen...
Then they stop that?
Then they kill that. They get rid of that. And then
right.
So they prevent, the conventional beekeepers prevent bees from swarming, because when bees swarm they take half the honey with them, and conventional beekeepers are basically honey farmers. Whereas natural beekeepers let their bees swarm and take the honey with them so that they can multiply. And also it's a way of preventing disease build-up.
Oh, how does it prevent disease build-up?
Well, one of the diseases is the varroa mite, which is a very nasty little mite that attaches itself to the thorax of the bee. It's like the size of the dinner plate on our body.
Oh God!
On the bee's body. Horrible. You can actually see it with the naked eye.
And the swarming.
So what happens is they like to grow on bees as they are growing in the cells, in the larvae bees, bee larvae.
Okay.
So when they swarm, that breaks the brood cycle, that breaks the making of the baby bees, because the queen, it takes her about 6 weeks to start for the bees to get big enough again. So what she does, she goes off and swarms, then she spends a couple of weeks in the hive,
Okay.
then she goes on a mating flight up. That's the only time the queen bee leaves the hive. She goes on a mating flight, mates with the drones, comes back and starts laying, and then it's another couple of weeks before they get big enough for the varroa to attach themselves onto them. So meanwhile the varroa are all sort of dead or gone. So you've got a whole... Whereas if you just kind of suppress the queen cell formation and the swarming, you've just got this build-up of disease in the brood chamber.
I see. Good. So, and then what happens if that disease builds up? Can that wipe out a whole hive?
Yeah, that's how bees die. It's, varroa mite is a really horrible mite, and it's one of the reasons why bees are dying.
So I don't understand, because conventional beekeepers, surely in terms of long-term honey produce, it would be in their interest to allow the swarms to happen.
Yeah, I know,
but they just want mass quick.
Yeah.
And so they don't.
If necessary, they'll buy new queens every year, and just because there are people who make queens artificially. So they'll just
make artificial queens.
Yeah. Well, I mean not.
I know. I've got an image of like a robot queen.
Sometimes they do actually artificially inseminate them, which is really horrible. They get the drones, however they mate, and put it in the queen with forceps. It's horrible.
Oh.
But no, I mean they kind of force the situation and artificially breed queens and treat the whole thing like a sort of mechanical process.
Is there any... I mean, I know so little about this, and I have kind of done the standard Google search about the bee problem, but this kind of detail is... Where's the best place to look for this kind of information?
There's something called Bees Action Network, which is... but they really focus on the effect of pesticides on bees and other pollinators.
They don't actually look at beekeeping methods, really.
The problem is that conventional beekeepers, as trained by the British Beekeepers Association, use quite a intensive interventionist approach. It's a bit like, intensive battery chicken farming. But they say that is the best approach, and if you don't do it like that, then you're an irresponsible beekeeper.
What the best approach being?
The conventional approach.
So, are you talking specifically about the suppressing swarming?
Yeah, taking off all the honey and giving them sugar for the winter and all sorts of things like that.
Oh wow! So is it actually a legal requirement for beekeepers to do it in that way?
No, it's not legal. But if you don't do it like that, you are scorned. It's a bit like people who take, who don't want to vaccinate their children or something. You're sort of made to feel that you are a bad beekeeper. In fact, conventional beekeepers use that word.
What bad?
You are a bad beekeeper if you let your bees swarm. You're a bad beekeeper if you don't go in there and check every 10 days and you're sort of...
it's as often as that, 10 days?
Yes, that's how often they suppress the queen cells. So
right, and so that's also...
they take the frames out, which really disrupts the brood, where all the little baby bees are being formed, and there's this whole bee scent, which the Germans called the Bien, B-I-E-N, which is like the well-being or the one-beingness of the bee colony. So by taking out the frames and sort of letting all the heat and the scent out, it's not good for the bees either.
So really, how often should they be looked in?
You shouldn't really need to look into beehives.
At all?
No.
Ever?
Look, this is a natural beehive here. This is a box for a natural beehive. And there's a window here. So you can actually look from the outside in to the box and see the comb all hanging down and see how they're doing.
So I'm trying to keep the sound of the thing going in.
Yeah, so
okay.
Then you don't need to go in to the hive to know what the bees are doing.
I see.
And basically you just watch the entrance of the hive to see whether the bees are behaving all right. And you get to know your bees pretty well once you care about them and once you notice them.
Right.
So you just look and see how they are from the outside.
So actual honey harvesting should only be once a year or even less.
Or if at all, because basically the honey should be for the bees, not the humans. We shouldn't be eating honey like the way we do. We should be just using it as medicine, really, ideally.
Right.
Because it's strong stuff and the bees work very hard to make it for themselves, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
If you take off their food supply, then it distresses them. It's just really obvious, isn't it?
Mm.
And we ought to... I mean, it's actually really silly because we ought to value them more as pollinators.
Rather than food creators.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So, I don't know, but this point of view is extremely extreme. If you say that to a conventional beekeeper, they would probably think I was a bit dotty.
Right. And why? What would their argument against you be?
Actually, interestingly, they don't really have an argument, but they just have this kind of, projection of negativity onto people who don't do it their way.
Right.
I think I don't know, it's interesting, it's very interesting. It would be interesting if you interviewed a conventional beekeeper to see what they said.
In response to this.
Yeah.
Because it's quite worrying, actually, to hear you speak about it in this way, because of the widespread ignorance. People, there's the vague awareness that our use of pesticides might have something to do with it, but actually, the bees might actually be okay with that if their immune system was up.
Exactly. Yeah, so it's a combination of things, and any one thing can tip them over. If we behave lovingly towards our bees and really gently and respectfully, then they wouldn't die so much. I mean, I've got 3 hives and they all came through the winter fine, and I put it down to just being respectful to them and providing them with just basically a bee sanctuary rather than a farm.
Are these, so do you have 3 hives like this one?
Yeah, normally they have a roof and a floor and an entrance. This one is actually on its way to a friend I'm helping catch bees. the bees are going to start swarming in a couple of weeks because this is swarming
so there's
season.
so there's actually a season.
Yeah,
So
which
is that
starts in May.
Okay.
It's timed perfectly with nature because the apple blossom. Once the apple blossom is fully in flow, which it is now.
Mm.
In fact, they'll probably start swarming about now on the next hot day. Once they know they've got plenty of food supply, then they think, right, okay, let's start swarming and multiplying if they've got a big colony.
Mm.
So then they'll swarm off, find maybe a tree to settle in, and then a beekeeper, like me, or a swarm catcher, which is what I am, will go and catch the swarm and put them in a hive, like this one.
How do you catch a swarm?
I've just made this skep here.
Oh, that is a skep. Oh.
Out of straw.
Yeah.
I'm very proud of it because I'm not very good at making things normally.
Oh, you made this?
Yeah.
You made this. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's straw and cane.
Oh, it's beautiful. Okay, I'll need to take a picture of this.
So what happens is that there's a colony just hanging like the size of a football underneath the tree. So you just inch this up around them, and then you go tap, and then they plop into the basket, and then you put them on the ground like this, just propped up like that, and then they'll sort of come in where the queen bee is, and they'll all cluster up the top here, and then in the evening you have a little cloth round, then you pull it up round the sides, carry it off gently, and then you'll take it to a hive, and then you'll just go like this
and shove it in the box,
and then they all fall in.
Gosh.
Put the lid on.
That must be quite chaotic though when you're doing it. Like you must get stung quite a lot.
It's really scary. I try not to wear any protection though, so that it makes me more sensitive, more more respectful towards them.
So that they're more used to you, or just in general your attitude towards them.
It's a more relationship when you're. I mean, I do have a bee suit. It depends if I go towards them and I can tell they're very agitated because they haven't eaten for a couple of days because they've swarmed 2 or 3 days ago, then I will wear a suit. But if I know they've just swarmed, then they're generally full of honey and they actually can't sting you.
Right.
And they don't.
So they can't.
They don't really want to sting people when they're swarming because they don't have a brood or any supplies in comb that they're trying to protect. So they're not feeling defensive because they have nothing to protect.
When you say they can't sting you,
well, apparently, and I don't know whether this is actually true. They've got so much honey in their gut because what they do is they suck up the honey from the comb, carry it in their gut, and then that affects their ability to sting.
Right.
It's
So, and this is after a swarm. So what happens? So during the swarm, they suck up this honey.
Before they swarm, they suck up the honey from the cells in the comb. Then they all.
Why do they do that?
It's because it's food supply.
Right.
For a few days.
Okay.
And then they go off with the new queen, and they look for somewhere to stay permanently. So if a swarm catcher catches them while they're doing that, then you can put them into hopefully a natural beehive. I've got 6 friends who want to start bees this year.
Really?
Yes. Wow. Last year it was 3, and they all caught. They all got a colony.
Really? Gosh.
I caught 5 swarms last year.
How do you go to find them exactly? Like, where do you go?
Well, you get a reputation after a while as being a swarm catcher.
Okay, but I mean, where do you go in order to find these?
Oh well, I don't
swarms?
go looking for them. People usually tell me that they're around. So basically, there are actually quite a lot of natural beekeepers now in Lewis area. So if you let your bees swarm, then one of those natural beekeepers' colonies will swarm, and if they're not at home to see it's happening and catch it, then they fly around, and then, like one of them was on a restaurant sign in the high street.
Really?
Yeah, so I got called a couple of years ago to catch it. So I had to get up this ladder and get a box and lean over the high street.
Oh gosh.
With this box, and all the traffic was stopped, and it was all really dramatic.
No,
it's really funny.
Yeah.
Gosh. But before you get that reputation, when you're first starting out, like, do you just walk around with your skep and hope to sort of bump into one? Yeah.
No, I haven't put any word out. I mean, this year I'm going to put some posters up, actually, and because there's 2 swarm catchers and there's 2 of us, and I'm just going to say, because it's like swarm education.
Okay.
Because people are so afraid of bees that we need to re-educate everyone that they are really docile, they're really fine, and to ring a swarm catcher when they swarm. So, because really it's an amazing thing. Last year I caught a swarm on a little tree down on a dead-end street down there, and there were loads of kids around just coming back from school, and they all stood there and watched me, and it was an amazing community event. It was just so beautiful, and some of the kids actually sat by the hive watching them all go in for hours. Yeah. They all sort of had to go home and have supper at some point, and then they all rushed back afterwards to...
Well, it's a fascinating event, I would have thought.
Yeah, it's a really amazing event.
See. Yeah.
It's really amazing. It's a great honour to be a swarm catcher, I must say.
Can I come if there's a swarm around? If you catch a swarm?
Absolutely.
While I'm here.
The thing is that you have to be, it's like being a midwife, you have to be on call. So I know probably from next week onwards I'll have to have my mobile phone on me at all times, because you have to drop everything and do it immediately, because otherwise they
How long do the swarms last?
About 6 weeks. 2
Oh
months.
gosh.
No, like how long
does each swarm?
Each swarm, they, have you seen swarms flying around, large masses of bees just flying around just randomly together?
Right,
it's a bit like in the cartoon, you see this sort of mass of bees, and then they all cluster on a branch somewhere, and that they might stay there for about 3 hours, and while they're doing
that short, gosh, so you really do have to get on the board.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So then they send out scouts while they're at this temporary place, and the scouts each find different places, and then they come back and they do this waggle dance where they basically decide which is the best place that they're going to go to. Right. And then they decide, and then they all go off to that place, and that's it. You can't catch them then.
Oh, I see.
It's usually in a chimney or a barn or somewhere quite hidden away. And once they've gone to their final place, they don't like to be moved. You can't really move them.
Right. Okay.
So it's all really fast and hair-raising. So
in that 3 hours...
or a day. I mean, it can be a day or even 2 days, but usually it's
only a few
3 to 5 hours, yeah.
So in that time span, what's actually happening? So they've picked up the new queen, and they're trying to...
The new queen gets hatched.
Yeah.
And then she flies off with half the colony of bees and half the honey.
So only half, so the other half stays behind.
Stays behind with the old queen. And that's why it's good when they swarm, because you get double the amount. Double the amount of bees, which is really why they ought to swarm more.
Yeah. Yeah. So they carry off the new queen.
Yeah,
when
the new
she's
queen
just hatched.
Goes off. She flies off with them.
Okay.
And then they find a permanent place to settle.
But in that in-between stage, they all attach to one place to protect her. So she's at the centre of the swarm, is she?
I mean, they all follow her. She's got a scent. It's a pheromone, a very subtle scent. So wherever the queen goes, they follow. They'll just... So if you can catch the queen in the cluster, then all the rest will follow. If you don't catch the queen, then they don't follow.
Oh, right. Has that happened to you before?
Yeah, it has actually.
Oh gosh, where you caught a swarm but not the queen, and then what happened?
Well, you put them in a box on the ground, and they all fly back to the queen.
Oh right,
which is a bit messy.
Yeah, I bet.
But because some swarms are quite hard to access, they're not as easy as just on the branch of a tree. But it is actually amazing, really, because
of course,
all the swarms I've come across, they've been very accessible. It's almost as though they kind of want to be caught. And the first time I caught a swarm was in my woods. I was just on the way to the woods and I was thinking I'd really like to keep bees again this year. Literally 5 minutes later there was
you found a swarm
in the entrance.
It was like they were waiting for you.
Yeah, I think there's a very deep and subtle connection between bees and humans, which I feel that they are our teachers actually, and that if you're called to be a beekeeper then it's really an amazing experience.
Thanks. Thank you.
All right.